You've seen the headlines about Jeffrey Epstein, right? Of course you have. But the real story, well, it's so much bigger and more complicated than that. It's this tangled web of serious crime, high-stakes politics, and a legal battle that has literally changed the rules of justice in America. To really get our heads around it, we're going to break it down into three key parts: what the feds actually accused him of, the political roller coaster of promises made and then broken, and this incredible fight for victims' rights that set a whole new precedent.
All right, so to really get to the bottom of this, we have to start right at the source. What you're looking at here isn't a news article or some online rumor. This is the real deal. It's the 2019 federal indictment from the Southern District of New York. This is the government's formal official accusation. And believe me, it lays the groundwork for absolutely everything that comes next.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we're going to dig into exactly what that indictment alleged. Then we'll pivot to the politics of it all, this wild timeline of promises about releasing the case files. And finally, we'll wrap up with the really profound legal legacy this case left behind in the ongoing fight for victims' rights. All right, let's dive right into part one, the crime itself, as laid out by federal prosecutors. We're going to focus just on what the government formally alleged in that indictment, because that's what set this whole thing in motion.
So what was the government actually saying? Well, the indictment cuts right to the chase. The central charge was a conspiracy to sexually exploit and abuse dozens of minors. And they weren't vague about it. They specifically named two primary locations, Epstein's homes in Manhattan and Palm Beach, Florida. Right away, you get a sense of a bi-coastal operation.
But this wasn't about random one-off incidents. No, the indictment painted a picture of a full-blown system, a methodical process. The government alleged that girls, some as young as 14, were recruited and paid hundreds of dollars in cash. But here's the crucial part. It wasn't just him. Prosecutors described this wider network of employees and associates who allegedly helped keep the whole machine running.
And this is where it gets even more twisted. One of the most disturbing parts detailed in the indictment was how this whole conspiracy allegedly fed itself. The claim is that victims were turned into recruiters. By paying them to bring in other girls, Epstein wasn't just abusing individuals. He was, according to prosecutors, building what they called a vast network, essentially using the victims to grow the entire operation.
Okay, so now we're going to pivot. The story takes a really sharp turn here, right into the world of politics. This part isn't about the crimes themselves, but about the very public promises made by the Trump administration to release all the files related to the case, and how those promises pretty quickly started to, well, change. And it all kicked off with this huge, crystal-clear promise. In early 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi went on the record with this. The message could not have been more direct. Everything was coming out. The expectation was set for full transparency. This timeline really tells the whole story of how that promise of transparency just crumbled. I mean, look at it. It starts so strong in March and April. You've got promises of everything, and President Trump himself saying 100%. But then, look what happens in May. That's the turning point. AG Bondi briefs the president and tells him his name is in the files. And what happens right after that? The entire public message changes. The FBI starts tamping down on conspiracy theories. By June, the reason for not releasing things suddenly becomes about protecting victims. And by July, bam, a DOJ memo slams the door shut. The reversal is complete, and it is stark. And if there was any doubt left, this quote from then FBI Director Kash Patel just says it all. Not doing it. You want to hate me for it? Fine. In just a couple of months, the official stance went from total transparency to total defiance. And this didn't just happen behind the scenes. It became its own political firestorm. And now for our final act. We're moving beyond the crime and the politics to look at what might just be the most enduring legacy of this entire saga. This is about a landmark legal fight that has fundamentally reshaped how we think about victims' rights in the American justice system.
At the very heart of this legal battle is a law called the Crime Victims' Rights Act, or CVRA for short. It was passed back in 2004, and the goal was pretty straightforward: make sure victims have a real voice in the justice system. It gives them a bunch of key rights, but the one that became absolutely critical here was the right to confer. Basically, the right to talk with the prosecutor handling the case.
Sounds simple enough, right? But the Epstein case blew open this huge, massive gray area in the law. It all came down to one single critical question. When do a victim's rights actually kick in? When does that clock start ticking? And this is where the legal fight really gets heated. You've got two sides pulling in opposite directions. On one side, the argument is that victims' rights should start during the investigation phase. before any formal charges are even filed. But the other side argued, hang on, you're not technically a crime victim until a crime has been charged, and giving victims a seat at the table too early could tie a prosecutor's hands. This was way more than just a legal debate. It had massive, real-world consequences.
And here is exactly why this legal question mattered so much in the Epstein case. Prosecutors struck a secret non-prosecution deal with him before filing any federal charges. And because of that timing, the victims were completely left in the dark. They never got their chance to talk to the prosecutor because, according to one interpretation of the law, their rights hadn't even started yet.
So, when you step back and you look at the whole picture, you see it, right? It's not three separate stories. It's one story where a criminal conspiracy was tangled up in political maneuvering, which then exposed a fundamental problem in how our legal system is supposed to protect victims. Each part of this story made the next part possible.
Ultimately, this case forces us to look beyond just one person and ask a much bigger, much more uncomfortable question. What does the whole Epstein saga really tell us about where power, politics, and justice all collide in America? And maybe more importantly, has anything actually changed? That's the question we're left with.